Walter Higgins sat frozen in his own daughter's living room, staring at the phone in his hand. He had just told his son-in-law, in front of the whole family, that he would never amount to anything. He had no idea that the man he'd humiliated was about to hand him a piece of paper that would change how he saw his entire family, forever. But to understand how a single dad who folded his own laundry at midnight ended up holding that kind of power, we have to go back 5 years, to the night everything started. Marcus Bell folded laundry at 11 at night, the way he did every night, when his phone buzzed with a text from his sister-in-law, Paula. Family dinner Sunday, bring the kids. Dad wants to talk about the trust fund, and about you honestly. He read it twice before setting the phone face down on the counter. 5 years. 5 years since his wife Renee had died in a car accident on a wet highway outside Columbus, leaving him with 2 kids under 10 and a mortgage he could barely explain to himself, let alone to his in-laws. 5 years of being the man they whispered about. At holidays, the one who couldn't hold it together, the one who'd let Renee's insurance money slip through his fingers, the one who showed up to Thanksgiving in a jacket that didn't quite fit anymore, because he'd stopped buying new clothes for himself 2 years ago. What none of them knew, what Marcus had never once corrected them on, was that he hadn't lost the insurance money. He'd used $11,000 of it, every cent he could spare after the kids' needs were met, to buy into a logistics software company 3 friends from his old warehouse job were building in somebody's garage. He hadn't told anyone. Not because it was a secret plan, because every time he'd tried to share something good with this family in the past, it had gotten picked apart before he finished the sentence. So he learned to say nothing. Now 5 years later, the garage company had a name, Haldex Freight Systems, 400 employees and a headquarters tower on the east side of the city. Marcus was its chief operating officer. He had never told his in-laws where he worked. He had let them believe what they wanted to believe, that he did something in shipping, that he was barely keeping his head above water, that his kids were being raised by a man running on fumes. He typed back one word. Renee's father, Walter Higgins, had never liked Marcus, not really. From the engagement dinner onward, Walter had made a habit of finding the crack in anything Marcus brought to the table. A promotion, a paid-off car, a good report card for the kids, and pressing his thumb right into it until it widened. Still at that same job, Walter would ask at every gathering, though he never once asked what the job was. Kids look thin, Paula would say, though the kids were fine, better than fine, and Marcus had simply stopped bringing snacks that invited comment. The worst of it was Walter's running line, delivered with a laugh that dared anyone to object. Renee could have married anybody. She picked the one who'd amount to nothing without her. Marcus had heard that sentence, or some close cousin of it, at every birthday, every holiday, every awkward Sunday dinner since the funeral. He had stopped defending himself around year 2. Defending himself only ever gave Walter more material. What Walter didn't know was that the trust fund he wanted to discuss on Sunday was tied to a business decision Marcus had made 3 years ago, a decision that had, in fact, made the family's shared inheritance far more valuable than anyone in that house understood. Walter had asked Marcus to co-sign some paperwork once, years back, never explaining what it was for. Marcus had signed it as a favor, then quietly discovered, through his own work, through contacts he'd built, that the paperwork tied to a small manufacturing stake the family had inherited and nearly let lapse. Marcus had spent 2 years on his own time making sure that stake didn't die. He'd never told them. It wasn't his story to take credit for. It was just decent work. But now Walter wanted to talk about the trust fund, and Marcus had a feeling he knew exactly what kind of conversation that would be. The Higgins house smelled like it always did, roast chicken and candle wax, and Walter met Marcus at the door with the same tight smile he always wore, like a man greeting someone he tolerated rather than welcomed. Kids can go watch television, Walter said, already steering them toward the den. Grown-up talk. Marcus sat at the table across from Walter and Paula. His mother-in-law, Diane, hovered near the stove, unwilling to sit for what was coming. Walter didn't waste time. The manufacturing stake your wife's family held, it's worth considerably more than we thought. Nearly $1 million, once it's restructured properly. Which means the trust needs a manager. Someone with real business sense. He paused, letting the words breathe. Obviously that's not going to be you. Paula nodded along. No offense, Marcus, it's just you work in a warehouse. This needs someone who understands markets. I don't work in a warehouse, Marcus said quietly. It was the first full sentence he'd spoken since sitting down. Walter waved a hand. Shipping, warehouse, whatever it is you do. The point is, we're naming Paula's husband as trustee. He's got an MBA. It's the responsible choice. He leaned back, satisfied, the way a man leans back after delivering a verdict rather than a proposal. You understand, this isn't personal. It's just, you were never going to be the one who built anything. Renee knew that too, at the end, though she never said it to your face. Diane's hand tightened on the counter. Even she flinched at that. Marcus sat still for a moment. Not angry, he'd expected anger, and it never quite arrived. What arrived instead was clarity. You want to know why that stake is worth $1 million now instead of nothing? Marcus said. 3 years ago it was about to be forfeited. Nobody in this house noticed the paperwork deadline. I noticed. I spent 2 years, on my own time, restructuring the licensing agreements so it wouldn't collapse. I never told you because I didn't think you'd believe I could. Walter's jaw tightened. That's a hell of a claim. It's not a claim. It's in the filings. You can check them tonight. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened an email, and set it on the table between them. And since we're clarifying things, I'm not in shipping. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Haldex Freight Systems. I have been for 2 years. The table went silent. Paula's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. That's not possible, Walter said, but his voice had lost its certainty. It's very possible, Marcus said. I used part of Renee's insurance money to buy into the company when it was 3 people in a garage. I never told any of you because every single time I brought something good into this family, somebody found a way to make it small. So I stopped bringing things. I just built quietly instead. Diane sat down slowly, her hand over her mouth. I'm not telling you this to win an argument, Marcus continued. I'm telling you because you just sat at this table and told my children's father, in front of them if they'd been in the room, that he was never going to build anything. And I need you to understand exactly how wrong that sentence was, because I've heard some version of it for 5 years and I am done carrying it quietly. Walter opened his mouth twice and closed it twice before anything came out. If what you're saying is true, the trust should go to whoever can actually manage it, Marcus said. Not because I want it. I don't need it, Walter. I make more in a year than that stake is worth. I'm saying this because you tried to hand it to a man with an MBA and no relevant experience over the person who already saved it once. And you did that without bothering to ask a single question about what I actually do. He stood, buttoning his jacket. Here's what I'd suggest, and it's just a suggestion. Put someone neutral in charge of the trust, a real advisor, not a family member trying to prove something. Let it grow for the kids' education, the way Renee would have wanted. I'll help set it up if you want my advice. I won't take a cent of it for myself. Paula's husband, red-faced through all of this, said nothing. Walter sat very still, the air gone out of him the way it goes out of a man who has built an entire identity on being the one who understood value, and just discovered he'd misjudged the most obvious asset sitting across his own dinner table for 5 years. Why didn't you just tell us? Diane asked quietly, and there was no accusation in it, just a kind of grief. Because for 5 years nobody asked, Marcus said. Not once. You assumed. I let you, because correcting you never seemed worth the fight. I was wrong about that too. Silence isn't the same as peace. I just didn't know that until recently. He drove home that night with his kids asleep in the back seat, the radio low, and he didn't feel triumphant. He'd expected to. What came instead was something quieter. The settling of a weight he hadn't fully realized he'd been carrying. The trust went to an independent advisor within the month. Walter never brought it up again. Paula called a few weeks later, hesitant, asking if Marcus might consider having coffee sometime, just the two of them, no agenda. He said yes. He didn't need their apology. He didn't need the acknowledgement, though when it came in small pieces over months, he didn't turn it away either. What he'd needed, it turned out, was simpler than any of that. He needed to stop being the man who made himself smaller so a room could stay comfortable. He needed to say once, out loud in his own voice, I built something. I did it while you weren't watching, and I did it for my children, and it was never nothing. The largest thing Marcus Bell ever built wasn't a company or a title on a door. It was the 20 minutes at that dinner table when he finally stopped shrinking to fit a story other people had written about him, and told the truth instead.